Because Avram and Yeshaya?
It's Shaya is his grandfather, and he wants. Yeah, so Avram is out. Turns out.
No, so where did the Av come from?
It came
he likes
from
Avram.
I likes Avram.
So it's out.
Avishai,
So just go Yeshaya.
Like Yaakov's brother?
But he doesn't. He likes.
He doesn't like it.
Yeah.
He likes Avishai better than Yeshaya.
Yeah.
You should know, we don't name our kids Yeshayahu, which was the full name of Yeshaya. Because Yeshaya had an untimely death. He was killed by his grandson,
Yes.
the king Menashe.
Famous.
So to Yirmiyahu. You hear a kid named Yirmiyahu, Yirmiyah. We change it a drop because there's an Indian. Chizkiah, the Eibishter added to him extra years. Chizkiah didn't die young. Yeshaya and Yirmiyah.
So why don't they do Chizkiah?
Oh, why don't we do Chizkiah?
As an Indian, if someone died early and they were supposed to, you shouldn't name.
If someone had a tragic
course.
passing, yeah. In fact, I know there was actually
That's
a big
why
Chassidish Rebbe who had a chassid who was becoming Lubavitch or whatever it was that. He wanted to name his kid Menachem Mendel, and the Chassidish Rebbe told him that because our Rebbe didn't have kids, you shouldn't name after him. Name Menachem Mendel, but have in mind the Rimanover, Mendel of Rimanover, one of the early great Chassidic Rebbes.
Well, that's what Deiber.
So that's how it came up. The Rebbe wanted people to name after the Tzemach Tzedek. That's how the name got going.
That's how I'm named after.
Is a guy allowed
So I mean, one guy once screamed at me. He says, "What are you, a fool?" The Rebbe said that Tzemach Tzedek, but he wanted people to be named after him. I told him, "Listen, we're not Sfardim of Ashkenazim. We don't name after people that are still alive." And you have a.
That's what that guy said. I would have punched him in the nose. You're a better man than me.
Anyhow, so the topic doctors. In this week's parsha, we have the idea of a doctor. We have already before. Ani Hashem Reifecha. The Eibush is our doctor. It says in B'Shalach, but here we have V'rapo Yerape, that a human being can be a doctor. So if anybody wants to get some doctor jokes off their chest, now's the time. The lawyers and the doctors that.
No, that's stuff against lawyers.
There was a doctor in Shul. The whole Shabbos is plastered with questions. He sees there's a lawyer. Very well known. Everyone knows the joke.
No, say it.
Everyone knows the joke.
I forgot it. No, I need to learn it.
I don't know the joke.
He sees there's a lawyer in the shul sitting on the side. No one disturbs him. The whole Shabbos, no one bothers. So the doctor approaches the lawyer. He says, "What's your trick? What's your secret? No one bothers you and me. I can't breathe over here." So the lawyer tells him it's very simple. If anyone asks me for advice after Shabbos, I send them a bill, and that's it. I never hear from them again. That's why no one bothers me. The doctor's like, "That's fantastic." After Shabbos, he comes home. He sees a bill in the mail from the lawyer. So I'm going to begin with the following story, which is mamish a marvelous Maisa. It's a deep story. Happened about 100 years ago in Slutsk, in Belarus, in White Russia. There was a great rabbi there named the Ridvaz. The Ridvaz. Ridvaz is what it's called, and he was a big Rav, a big Gaon. And the following story took place. There was a Yiddish butcher who had, it wasn't a big money maker, but he had his butcher shop going, and it was one Thursday afternoon, the busiest day of the week. People are coming to buy flesh for Shabbos. And the chveis, like 5 p.m., all of a sudden he claps and he says, "Everybody out, I'm closing the store. It's mincha time, closing the store." And there were many people in the store wanting to buy. He said, "I'm sorry, you can come back tomorrow, or if you want, I'll come back chveis later, between 7 and 8 I'll be open again, but I'm sorry we have to close." And there happened to be a big doctor who was nearby, who was a Yid, not from at all, and he witnessed this. And he asked the butcher, "You're not a wealthy man. Thursday afternoon, this is your time of the week, and you're just sending everybody out. Why?" So the butcher says, "It's mincha time, I have a shear." And the doctor's like, "You serious?" And the butcher says, "Listen, you can't just be concerned about this world. You got to be concerned about the world to come. There's a vital world as well, so sometimes you got to make sacrifices." So the doctor laughed and he said, "You believe in that stuff? You think you're actually going to have a place in the world to come? There's no such thing." And the butcher says, "Well, maybe for you there isn't. But for someone who keeps mitzvahs, we hope that there actually is." So the doctor was kind of taken aback. But then he comes to his senses and he tells the butcher, you think there's Olam Haba? I'm going to sell you my Olam Haba. The butcher says, for how much? It sounds as quite a few stories that have this similar part to it. And the doctor says, what do you have in your wallet? He had $1 or something. The doctor said, that's good enough. The butcher gives him the $1. They shake hands. Maybe they even wrote it down. The arrangements were made. The doctor walks off laughing to himself, and the butcher runs off to shul. This happened when the butcher was still yet a younger man. Decades pass, decades. He's still in his butcher store. And one day, a woman, an older woman, but a respected, aristocratic woman, walks in. And the butcher says, hello. She says, hello. She says, I'm not here for any meat. She says, I'm the wife of Dr. So-and-so, the big doctor. By now, the doctor had passed on. She said, my husband came to me a little while ago in a dream. And he says when he went to heaven, the following thing happened. They judged him, and they weighed his mitzvahs, they weighed his averos on a scale, and it really wasn't looking good. He barely had any mitzvahs to his name. He was a sinner. But he said, Bezdin, I was a doctor for decades. I healed so many people, and many of them were poor, and I never charged them. Poor people came through my door for free. That got to be worth something. So the Bezdin says it is, and you have a good taina. The problem is you forfeited your portion in the world to come. You sold it. So the guys say, what do you mean I saw it in the back? They said, listen, somebody else owns it. You got to buy back from him. I can't. I'm already I'm here. I'm in the wrong place. Well, your wife is still there. Give her the message. She comes, his wife, in a dream, and she has this whole story in a nightmare. She doesn't have it once. She has it night after night after night. And she was going meshuga, berserk. So she came to the butcher and she said, listen, I'm going to pay you back the $1, however much it was. We need the Olam Haba back. And the butcher says, listen, the Eibishter knows if I'm nicht kein größer tzaddik. I don't know if I myself have a future in Olam Haba. But now that you're telling me that this doctor has lots of mitzvahs, he saved people's lives for free. He has big merits, and I own it. I ain't giving that up. I bought it. I rightfully bought it. It was his idea to sell it. I paid for it. I ain't giving this up so fast. And the woman was crying, and he said no. And they said, you know what, let's go to the Rav. So they went to the Ritvaz. So the Ritvaz was the Rav at the time, about 100 years ago. And he hears a story. This is not an everyday story that comes to the rabbi. So the Rav says, you know what? He sets a time. He sets a place. It's going to be in the big shul at a certain amount of time, at a certain time of the day. Both of them should be there, and they're going to have a din Torah. Word spreads around the whole city about this fantastic machlokes. And when the day of the court case came, the shul was packed. The whole city came. People took off work. The whole city came just to see this spectacle. His taina, her taina, the dreams. What's the Rav going to say? The whole town was there. The lawyers were there. Everyone was there. The shoemakers, frum, not so frum. Every Jew in town came just to be there. They hushed the crowd. It's shah still. The woman gets up and says her taina, as we reported. The Rav tells the butcher, no, what do you say? He gets up and says his thing. He says he bought it, he owns it, he has no reason to. After this whole dreams fakert, now he doesn't want to give it up. He knows it's worth something special. So the Rav says, I need a half hour of deliberation. He went to his room. Don't know if there were other Rabbanim with him, but during that half-hour intermission, the whole shul broke out into chatter. Everyone's talking, You had people saying, she's right, he's right. What? Yeah. Well, he's saying the doctor only sold it because he didn't know what he was saying. He didn't think it was real.
But if
He knew.
Yeah, if you sell a piece of diamond and you think it's glass, you sell it for $1. You thought it was a CC.
But if many
but it
people
was
tell
really
you
a
that
diamond.
the diamond's real and you just go, no, it's not a diamond. It's not a diamond.
He was mocking the guy.
Yeah.
He was mocking him. I know the concept, and you believe in it, and I don't. Like,
He didn't believe it
part
because he
of the
didn't
chatter.
know. It's like when you
Part of
tell
the
a
chatter.
kofer,
Part of the
Didn't
chatter.
finish, but you can say that.
It's like,
There's an addition.
it's like you tell a kofer the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. It's because they have a wrong perspective. That's why they choose not to believe in it. Anyhow, it's an interesting thing. So the whole place was full of talk, chatter, this way, that way. After a half hour, the Ritvaz comes out. Shash still can hear a pin drop. And he says, I've come to a psak, and the psak has 3 parts. Number one, the sale was initially void.
Was what?
Void. The initial sale was void. We have to listen to the whole thing. Why was the initial sale void? You can't sell mitzvahs that you've done. When it comes to Yisachar and Zvulun making a partnership, I'll pay you, and some of the learning that you do, it gets accrued to me. That might work for future things, but you can't sell a mitzvah that you've already done. And the Ritvaz says the following mashal. Imagine you spend a month in the Swiss Alps, and you're working physical labor, pleasurable labor in the mountains, and you're getting paid for it, but you're also enjoying the air. And it's just the scenery is so serene and beautiful, calms your nerves, and the exercise and the labor that you did built up your muscles. After a month, your health is improved. Imagine you would tell your employer, you know what? All the physical benefits that I got from this month here in the Swiss Alps, I want you to transfer it to another fellow. Can't do it. It's not transferable. These are things that are so united with you. It's not so much as transferable. The money, the wage that he's going to get at the end of the month, he can tell the employer to transfer it. But not the physical benefits that came from actually being there begufa, with his body. So the Ritvaz says the same thing. When you do a mitzvah, it's not physical cash. The Eibush is going to give you a reward, even a spiritual reward. It's something happens to your soul. And you appreciate the beautiful air, so to speak, is what you're going to get in Gan Eden. It's not transferable. And therefore the sale of Olam Haba was void.
So why did he let him in? Probably didn't let him in.
Was that everything
Taylor
that happened?
Leibach Shemayim.
There's three parts to the psak.
Yeah,
Listen.
that was the first part.
The first part is that it was not, the sale was void.
Because of this reason.
Yeah, because you can't sell it. There's no. Here's the second installment. Even though the sale is void, the doctor still forfeited his portion in the world to come. Because the Gemara says in Kedushin, if somebody at the end of their life openly regrets all the mitzvahs they did, they lose all the merits of the mitzvahs. It's called if someone's toya ala rishonos. If somebody completely regrets mitzvahs they did, they can lose the credit for it. By this doctor laughing and belittling the whole Olam Haba, he lost it. So he didn't sell it, but he forfeited it, he lost it. So then the whole shul starts crying, But here comes the clincher. And the Ritvaz says, but. Hitaka forfeited it. But look what happened through this whole story. By him coming into the dreams to his wife, and the wife bringing the butcher to the dinner, you see what's happened? The whole town, the whole city has come here. People that aren't frum are here in the shul. And you know what they're busy discussing? They're getting caught up in the discussion. And they're busy discussing, was the Olam Haba sold? Was it not sold? You have lawyers who weren't frum who were getting involved in the legal aspects of the case. People that haven't thought about Olam Haba for decades. All of a sudden are having a real argument, with real logic. And he says, so the Rav says, fascinating. The entire city has just been uplifted.
What was the second thing again?
That he forfeited because he regretted it. The first part is the sale was void. The second part is, but he forfeited anyways because he regretted.
So
he
why
laughed.
is the
He
dream
belittled
telling
it.
him that if he gets it back, he can kind of get it.
Because he didn't know how.
No,
He didn't-
why
No,
she
because
buys
by
it back?
bringing it all together, that's...
No, by getting it. No, by getting it. Well, listen. Well,
He
that's
was already kofer. He already gave it up. It doesn't exist.
okay. I hear the question. But let's just finish the third part. So the Rav said it's fascinating. because of what this doctor has done, you have the entire city has just been elevated. And you have people that who knows what's going on in their personal life with Torah and mitzvahs, but they took off a day from work and they're busy back and forth discussing Olam Haba as if it's something real, tangible in front of them. This doctor belittled Olam Haba, but then he just made it real for hundreds and hundreds of people. And because of that, with that schus, he's going to get it back. And that was the third psak of the...
What's your loss of dollar?
That was the third
Now
psak.
it became a mitzias.
Now he gets
No, in
it
other words,
back.
he gets it back because b'chal kol hamazakes harabim, if you cause the rabbim to have a merit, it all gets accredited to you. So because the whole city is now koching in Olam Haba because of him, so now he's not going to be let in. He's the.
New Olam Haba that he's getting. That one was not forfeit.
It could be. It
In
could
the
be.
first
Granted,
part-
yeah,
in
it
the
could be.
first reason you can also say schar mitzvah mitzvah. So the only way you can have the schar is the mitzvah itself. The mitzvah itself is the schar. So
Right, and if you forfeited it, the shaila is when you forfeit it, is it lost forever, or it's just been removed from you and you have to somehow get it back? You have to somehow get it back.
It's gonna access
Anyhow, but this is it's a fascinating story.
It's a Baal Shem Tov story, the same.
Yeah, sure, that's
where
not
they had
yeah.
to buy it back.
Right,
Where
yeah,
they-
yeah.
No,
No, but here,
Oh, wait, so yeah, so all these stories of people buying Olam Haba, according to the first thing that your dad says,
Wasn't
you
it
can't do
Baal
that.
Shem Tov story?
All
right.
these stories of buying them.
That was his opinion. That's his opinion.
What's
It's a big sugya. We'll have a shir about it sometime when it comes to selling mitzvahs, because it has to do with the whole sugya of the Yisachar and Zvulun.
Oh, the Tillim Zager.
Chaim
Back
the
to
Tehillim
Tehillim.
Zoger, or different.
Zezman,
Anyhow.
the back of the Tehillim. He said, if I have a schos, I'll give it up.
Oh, right, the guy that
Of
had the
giving up my
yeah,
Olam
the lichtik,
And the town was saved because of
yeah.
it. So,
If I have epizes chus, right,
Back
because
to
it's
Tehillim.
There's a
right.
Gemara that talks about you can
but that
only
wasn't
sell.
sold. That was
You
that
can
was
only
that was
sell
given.
the mitzvahs beforehand. You can't come later on. Yisachar and Zvulun, remember we had this whole thing in the Gemara.
Yeah, but
Yisachar and Zvulun, I can make a deal with you, and my learning for the next 3 days is going to be on
right,
your
the
chesed.
shaila is the
I
past.
can't come and say the last 3. Give me $50 in the last 3 days I learned.
Well, we just said that a few minutes ago, but that's not.
There's a
it's
Gemara on
not
that.
universal.
It's not, but the whole shakla of Tari Gemara, the
Right, you
end of the
can't sell-
maskana is you can't.
Well,
That's
usually we
Yisachar
say
and Zvulun.
Usually we say fakert. You can't sell something which doesn't yet exist. Usually we
No,
say
but
the
you can-
opposite.
you can take a price. You can say, if you give me now, I'll learn in the next 3 days it's yours. But the Gemara, the Maskana, the Gemara, remember I was here with Obi, we were
Oh,
looking
the
at
Gemara in Saited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You remember that was a while ago.
That was a long time
That was
ago.
like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
almost.
and I
So-
got him where he was wrong.
Ooh, well, all right.
That's what you
Yeah, okay, all right, fine. Let's.
We got it. I remember
That was
Gemara.
about the two brothers,
Two
Shimon
brothers.
and Azariah.
Exactly.
Shimon and
they
Azariah.
brought
Yeah.
in from Yisachar and Zvulun that you can
doctor
only
thing?
do it.
Anyhow, this. Yeah, what?
There's a doctor
You
thing.
can
That
give
was-
away.
And you were Taka here.
Mended.
No, so you see from
can
over
give it
here.
away, though.
No. You see from over here
Save people,
that this
according to that
doctor,
story.
the schusim that he had from Gan
Give away
Eden,
Olam Haba.
was all the fact that he had healed people. It was, in other words, he as far as Torah mitzvahs, he had nothing. But the fact that he had healed people, had he not sold his Olam Haba, he would have had an entry there just because of the fact
Yeah.
that he was a good doctor.
That makes sense.
That's it. Well,
Indeed.
well, let's see. Let's see.
Then all doctors go to Gehenna.
So the Gemara in the end of Kedushin says the best doctors go to Gehenna.
Yeah.
So we're going to come back to that, but I'll just tell you that the Maggid of Mizrich had a student. And this student of the Maggid was a doctor. And he was learning the end of Masechta Kedushin where it says, Toiv Shebareifim, the best doctors go to Gehenna. Imagine where the bad doctors go. Anyhow, so he went to the Maggid and he asked the Maggid, "What? I'm a doctor, what's this Gemara mean for me?" So the Maggid told him, how many brachas are there in Shemona Esrei? 18.
Because they don't say
Toiv is Gematria 17.
the ones that only do
Exactly. Toiv Sheberoifim, the doctors that only daven 17 brachas. They don't really believe Rafa'enu Hashem guards the healer. They think they're the healer.
Yeah, the guy-
They go to Gehenna. But if the doctor is not Toiv because he davens all 18, he believes God's the healer, then he ain't going to Gehenna. Anyhow,
But what's the pshat?
the Pasha the Pshat is that we had a shir a year ago. I did it recently with the Bochum again. All about Moshe Rabbeinu's
Face. We were
the
there
face,
after
and if he had a
Milchamah.
bet. So the source of that story is in the commentary Tiferes Yisrael. The Tiferes Yisrael, Yisrael Lifshitz, was a student of Rabbi Akiva Eger. He lives in Germany, and on that Gemara in the end of Kedushin, he brings this story of Moshe Rabbeinu's portrait, without going into all the details. But he brings it and he says, just like Moshe Rabbeinu says, yeah, I had an awful Yetzer Hara, but I broke myself. And that's why I became worth something. To break your midas. And so based on that, he says, what the pshat of Tov Shabbat from the best doctor? When a doctor is cocky and thinks that they have the answers to everything, and there's no uncertainties, I'm sure, about this, and they don't discuss and converse with their contemporaries and other doctors, but they feel such a gaiva, like sometimes you do see by doctors. Sometimes you have humble doctors, but often a doctor, walks down the street with the nose up and everything. You just feel the aura of yeshus that the fellow has, and the person never works to try and break their midas, their humility, but they just allow themselves to, become more arrogant and more arrogant. That type of person goes to Gehenna. If the doctor thinks he's a good doctor, that's the simple shot.
For the word taiv, saying.
Someone who thinks is similar to what the Maggid said. The Maggid just made a gematria, but it's the same idea. When the doctor that thinks he's a good doctor, he forgets about God and fakert, he becomes a.
He has humility, then.
Exactly. Fine, but that's going to come. That Gemara will come back up soon. Anyways, we begin with number one. Number one is a Gemara. It's found twice in Shas, in Brachos and in Baba Kama. The Tanya, the Braisa says, Devei Rabbi Shmuel Omer, the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel said, V'rape yerape. This week's parsha we read, if two people get into a fight and one of them knocks the other one bad, he has to pay. Like we spoke on Sunday, there's 5 things he has to pay: damage, pain, embarrassment. V'rape yerape, doctor bills. Says Rabbi Shmuel, Mikan, from here you see, Shenitin Reshus L'Roife L'Rapois. A doctor has permission to heal. That's the simple meaning. From here you see a doctor has permission to heal. What does that mean? Look at Rashi number 2. Rashi says there in Baba Kama, Nitin Reshus L'Roifim, the doctors have permission L'Rapois to heal. V'lo yaminon, and we don't say Rachmana Mache, the Eibishter caused him to be ill, V'il Maseh, and this guy's intervening and trying to heal him. As Rashi saying, without the pasuk, you would say, if somebody's ill, God made him ill. Who do you think you are to try and circumvent the Gzeira of God? Rachmana Mache, God punished him, God striked him. V'il Maseh, and the doctor wants to heal him. That's what one would have thought. Comes the pasuk and says, no, a doctor has permission to heal.
So you turn this Rufus with Rabbi Akiva.
Exactly. About a poor man.
Like he was onto something.
Yeah. How can, but the Torah also says give tzedakah, so you could say the same thing. Right. But the funny thing is, if you look anywhere in Shas or Medrash, Tunas Rufus, the Tunas Rufus told Rabbi Akiva, you can't give money to the poor. Imagine, Tunas Rufus said like this, after the Churban, you guys are considered not children of Hashem, you guys are considered servants of God. If a Yid is poor, it's like a king taking a servant and throwing him into a prison cell. If someone comes in the middle of the night to feed the prisoner, the king will be upset. Rabbi Akiva told him, you got it wrong, we're still the Eibish's children. Imagine a king would put his son in a prison cell and say no one should feed him. If nonetheless, despite the king's ruling, someone comes and feeds the prince, the king ultimately will be happy. That was Rabbi Akiva's response to Tunas Rufus.
Unless they're crazy. What? Unless the king's crazy.
Right. Yeah, well, so Rabbi Akiva agreed that a poor man, fine, the Eibishter made a gzeira, but the Eibishter is happy if somebody breaks it. But you don't have anywhere in Gemara where the Gemara says, it says in Parshas Re'eh, give tzedakah. It says in Mishpatim, in Kesed, give tzedakah. Mikan, from here you see, you have reshus to give tzedakah. It doesn't say that anywhere. It's as if when it comes to tzedakah, it's obvious you can give. Yeah, when it comes to refuah, we need this pasuk. Well, what's going on over here? Look at number 3. Tosfos, shenitn reshus l'roifa l'rapis. It's Tosfos there in Baba Kama. V'im taimar v'hamirape l'chudesh amin alei. Why does it say v'rape yirape, double expression? Just say rape. Why the double expression? The Yeshloim Tosfos answers, and this is already getting critical. The hava, I would have thought, hani mili. When is this makub b'dei adam? If somebody was smitten by another fellow, a doctor can heal him, which is the case in Pashas Mishpatim. The two people are having a fight. If it would just say for Rape, you would think there and only there a doctor can intervene. But if somebody Stam Nebuch gets an illness from heaven, you can't see where it came from. Mamish came from heaven. If the doctor heals him, it's as if his breaking the decree of the king. Kamashmon. That's why you need the extra word, Deshari, that is permitted. So from Tosfos you could say the difference is by stock. If somebody's poor, you can't pinpoint and say God made him poor. But if somebody mitamol got sick, it's almost like the Eibusha threw a lightning bolt at the guy. There's more reason to think that the Eibusha made him ill now. It's apparently a message from God, so I can't intervene. So Tosfos says that's why I need the double lashon, which means like this: if I wouldn't have either of the words, you would think maybe a doctor can't even heal. Makar b'dei adam.
Punches a guy and breaks his arm.
Now, what would be the reason for that?
Because divine intervention. That he got hit by
If Reuven smashes Shimon,
Just like
so you'd say exactly. So you would say like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, if Reuven hits Shimon, Shimon should know this was meant to happen. Reuven didn't have to hit him, but as far as Shimon's concerned, it was supposed to be. So you might think, so the doctor will say, how can I heal him? So I need Verape for that. But even once you have that, it's not the same as if Reuven Stam got hit by a lightning bolt from heaven. If it directly came from heaven, it looks like you, in a greater sense, you're breaking, undermining the decree of God. That's why I need both words. That's what Tosfos points out. Interesting. Number 4. This is from Tosfos. It's called Tosfos Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. For many years, people thought it was from the famous Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, who wrote Sefer Chassidim, who was from the Chassidei Ashkenaz, the pious men of Germany in the 1100s. But ultimately, they realized it's not from him. It's from someone else who was also called Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, Rabbi Yehuda Ser Leon. Not from Ser Leon in Africa, but he was in France, in Paris. But Yehuda's a lion. He was called Ser Leon, like Mr. Leon. Ser Leon. And he had a big yeshiva in Paris. One of the big Baalei Tosfos. And in it he writes like this. Mikan from number 4. Shenitna Torah Rishus, Shenosna Torah. The Torah gave Rishus to a doctor to heal. Hiksha had Rav Yankiv Ma'orleans. Rabbi Yankiv Ma'orleans is also one of the early Baalei Tosfos. He was murdered, the whole story, but he's also known as Rabbeinu Tam. Not every time we say Rabbeinu Tam is it the famous Rabbeinu Tam. Anyone that's name is Yaakov could be called Rabbeinu Tam, because it says and told us Yankiv Ish Tam was a sincere man. Yoshev Oilim lived in the tents, so he was called Rabbeinu Tam of Orleans. And he asked, Pshita, I need a pasuk. Ki lama lo yirapu arofim. Why can't a doctor heal? As if you need a pasuk this week to teach me that. Of course, a doctor could heal. V'aksiv, it says v'hashevoiseloi ze avedas gufay. When it comes to the pasuk of Hashavas Aveda, we learn out from the extra words v'hashevoiseloi. It means if somebody got lost, giving someone proper directions is actually a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. The guy himself is lost. So if somebody's lost in directions, you have to help him. Imagine if someone comes and is gushing blood. Of course you got to help him. It's a no-brainer. The pasuk says you can't stand by while your brother is dying. Now, but pashtus, that pasuk is talking about when someone's dying. If someone's bleeding, and his life's at stake, then that pasuk tells you have to heal him. But if somebody just has a headache and is looking for pills to help his head, you would learn that perhaps from Hashavas Aveda. If a guy's lost, you have to help him, then for sure, if he's suffering, you should have to help him. So Rabbi Yankiv Moralin says, I don't get it, as if you need a pasuk to teach me. Well, Piddush, he answers like this. The Eibishter allows that the Roifa can charge. The Kosalka Daitach, you might think he has to do it for free. Mitayma de Parishna, for the reason we said before. If you see someone drowning, you have to save their life. Fee or no fee, right? You don't say, can you afford, what's your insurance? You got to save the guy. So you might think for that very reason, you have a mitzvah to help him. So maybe a doctor can't charge.
Solemn member's not here.
Maybe a
Or like
doctor.
credit card reader.
So that the chiddush, when the Torah says a doctor is allowed to heal, it means he's allowed to charge for healing. That's the pshat. Fascinating. Rabbi Yomer says, Rabbi Yehuda, that his teacher said, his
Rabbi
teacher.
Yaakov's No.
No.
He quotes the three above. Taisus up here.
Oh, the Rabbi Yomer, Rabbi Yehuda Sir Leon, I believe, was a student of the Ri himself, one of the biggest of the Baalei Taisus. Either the Rabbi Yomer de'ima hasam, if you would learn from Ashavas Aveda, or you would learn from Loi Samad, Salka Daitach Sheyirapu Chalom by the Adam, if Reuven hit Shimon. Avu Chaloim Haboy Ma'atzmam, if it comes on its own. Ein Lehem Larapet, you should not heal. Shadoimim Kemavatim Gzeres, it looks like you're undoing the decree of Kamash Malon Krush, Yuchel Rapet, you're allowed to heal. So that's similar to Taisus in number 3. The difference is that Taisus says we need Rapo Yerape. The first Rapo is if man hits man. The second Yerape is if it comes from God.
Just a pasuk overall.
Right. Taisus in number 4 he's quoting that the whole Rapo Yerape is not two different limudim. It's one, for this at least. And it's teaching you that even if someone got struck by lightning and the like, if someone was hit by another person, I would know that from Lo Samad Al Damarecha, I would know that from Hashavas Aveda. Fine. So there's a small difference. But ultimately, it seems from Taisus, both Taisusin, that at the end of the day, any illness you have, the doctor has the right to heal and to charge and to heal as well. Fine. Well, that's basically what we knew, right? Anyone gets any illness, you always go to a doctor. Not so fast. Join me in the Ramban in number 5. A famous, fascinating Ramban. Ramban in Parshas B'chul Koisai. So people have been studying this Ramban for hundreds of years, and people have different ways of reading it. You'll tell me your thoughts on the matter. V'haklal, there's both the paragraphs here, both columns are from the Ramban. So we begin on the right hand side. V'haklal, the rules like this: B'yos Yisrael shleimim. If Yidden are complete, v'heim rabim, in other words, you have most of the Yidden doing mitzvahs. Lo yisna'ig in yonam b'teva klal. They're not under the confines of nature. Loi begufam, not their bodies. Loi ba'artzam, not the Holy Land. Loi bichlalam, not the entire nation. V'loi b'yachid mem, and not an individual. When most people are doing the right thing, then the tzibur plus the individuals get taken care of. Ki yivarech Hashem, God will bless their bread, their water. V'yasir machlam ekim, he'll remove all illnesses. Ashal lo yitztarchu l'roifa, you won't need a doctor. Ulehishtamer b'derech midach, and b'klal, you won't have to follow doctor's orders, right? Half-hour brisk walking every day, this and that. You don't have to do any of that stuff. K'moisha Amar, that says in B'shalach, Ki ani Hashem reifecha, I am your doctor. Okay, so far fine. The Ramban is just telling us if we do the will of God, we'll live a supernatural existence. No one will get sick, and obviously you won't need a doctor. Okay. Says Ramban, V'chein hoyu hatzadikim oisim b'zman hanavua. When there was prophecy amongst the Yidden, during the first Beis HaMikdash, or even before the first Beis HaMikdash, during the times of the Shoftim, he says like this, Gam ki Yikram, Avon, even if a sin would happen, Sheyichalu, that they would get sick, Lo Yidrushu B'roifim, the tzaddikim, a righteous man would never go to a doctor, even though he got sick.
It's different. He's saying that Averas made people sick.
That's exactly what he's saying. In other words, beforehand he said if you do the will of God, you won't get sick, you won't need a doctor. And now he's saying, but what if you do get sick because someone sinned? Don't go to a doctor, go to a prophet. Because why are you sick? The sickness is a symbol of an illness in the soul. The Navi can look at you and tell you where you sinned.
Rabbeinu Bechaya, by the way, says the difference between Ani Hashem Reifecha and V'Rabbi Yerabe is the dogish.
I know, I have it on the next page. Yep. The Ke'inyan Chizkiyo b'chalaisa, when Chizkiyo was sick, it says he turns to the wall. He turned to the wall. Vayispal Chizkiyo daven to the Eibishter. Because Chizkiah was a righteous man, he knew if he's sick, it's something in his activities that that's nishvi sedarf design, not appropriate, and that's what he has to fix. Between you and God, there's no reason to go. It doesn't make sense to go to a doctor. Va'amar akosov further, it says about the king Asa, one of the early kings. There was Shlomo had a son Rechavam, who had a son Aviyah, and then had a son Asa. Asa was a good king, but the pasuk says, and it's quite a cryptic pasuk, no details. Gam b'chol yo lo dorash Hashem ki b'roifim. When Asa was sick, he didn't turn to God; he turned to the doctors. So, frekt an Ramban, is that one crime or two crimes? One crime, he didn't daven to God. Number two, he went to the doctors. The ilu hayadvar haroifim nohug behem. If it was normal to go to a doctor, matam sheyasker roifim. Why would the pasuk mention he turned to the doctors? No, eina ashim. The guilt is only bavush lo darsha. He didn't see God. Aval hu kashay aymadim. But it's like when a person says, lo yachal ploini matzah b'chag hamatzahs kiyim chametz. If I say Yankel didn't eat matzah, but he ate chametz, it's two infractions. A, he didn't eat matzah when he should have. Worse, he ate chametz. So to here, we're saying Asa did two crimes. A, he didn't daven to the Eibishter. B, he went to the doctors. If everyone went to the doctors, and the doctor's thing is fine, it's only one infraction. He didn't turn to Hashem. It must be going to a doctor is out of place as well. Hashem benavi. If you seek God through the prophet, lo yidrish b'roifim, you won't seek out the doctors. And then he coins the phrase, Uma chelik l'roifim bebeis oisei rotzen Hashem. What place do doctors have in the house of one who does the will of God? Hashem promised, I'll bench your bread, your waters, I'll remove illness. And Bechal, he says, a doctor, back in those days, it was very much all about your diet, what you eat, what you drink. Lahazim imenu, to be careful, what you shouldn't drink, what you should. But the Eibishter promises, I'll bench your bread, I'll bench your water. In other words, I'll give you the correct food, the correct drink. It'll all be healthy, nutritious, with all the vitamins, alazachin. And there's no reason to go to a doctor. You know, I would compare this to a statement the Rambam said. But we're going to see a number of interesting opinions on the matter.
Eating right, sleeping right.
Right. But how the Rambam says if someone eats right and drinks right, I can guarantee they won't be ill. Halavayim. There's another Rambam in Hilchas Tainus. The Rambam says like this: if the Eibishter sends a horrible calamity to a community, right, it's an alarm call. The Eibishter is sending you a message that there's something inappropriate in the way you're acting, and you got to shape up. And the Rambam says if people ignore the message and they think, this is just it's nature, it's happening for whatever reason, and they would call professionals to come take care of the issue. The Rambam said it's midas achzoris, it's cruelty on their own souls. How come they're not getting the message of God? It seems like for the Ramban, the same thing is in the microcosm of a person. It's not just a calamity of a country or a community. On each individual, if somebody's ill, it's the Eibishter's message. So you got to find out what's the message the Eibishter is giving you. What's the alarm? What am I doing wrong? Fix it, and the illness will leave. It doesn't make sense to go to a doctor. In other words, this is different than what Rashi says in number 2. Rashi in number 2 said there's a savara not to go, or like Taisa says, not to go to a doctor, because how could I mix in, if the Eibishter wants somebody to be ill, how could the doctor mix in the Eibishter's plans? Here we're saying something else. We're saying there's another reason not to go to a doctor, because it doesn't make sense. The Eibishter sent the illness as a symbol for there's something not right in your spiritual life, and go fix that. It doesn't make sense to go to a doctor. Continues the Ramban. V'kach omru. The last couple lines of Masechta Bracha speaks about Rabbah and Rav Yosef, two of the greatest Amoraim. Each one had a different field of expertise. Rabbah's was in Pilpul, in Lomdus, and scholarship, and depth, sharpness. And Rav Yosef was an expert in all information. Rav Yosef was told by some astrologers, you're only going to rule for 2 years, then you'll die. So he didn't want the job of being rabbi. So he gave it. So Rabbah became the rabbi. Kol Esrin v'tartin shnin. All 22 years that Rabbah ruled, Rav Yosef afilu umna lebeisei lo. Rav Yosef didn't even call a blood letter to his house. Now what does that mean? The simple meaning is that back in the day, if somebody was a choshev guy, the doctor came to you. You're not a choshev guy, you go to the doctor. Rav Yosef didn't want the astrologer's reading that he has 2 years of chashivas to begin, and therefore he wanted to conduct himself as a private, simple citizen for 22 years. He never called the blood letter, he went himself.
Maybe it means just that he didn't need it.
So the Ramban, that's how the Ramban learns. The Ramban learns, why didn't he need it? Because he was a humble man, he was a righteous man, the Eibusher never caused him to be, he never needed it. The Eibusher never had to send him an alarm. V'amoshul lehem, there's a moshul, tara d'loi posach l'mitzvasa, posach la'asya. A doorway that doesn't open for a mitzvah will open for a doctor. If you don't open your door to let the poor man in, then the doctor's going to come visit you. If you don't open your door to do mitzvahs, then the Eibush is going to send you he'll send you a lightning bolt. It will be an illness, God forbid, and then the doctor's going to have to come. It's like the Gemara says also, if you don't bring your gifts to the Kohen, the Kohen's going to come to your door for your wife being a Saita. The Gemara says that too. So yeah, you got to make sure that...
Back in the day, keeps the doctor away.
Yeah.
You heard that?
It's an apple. No, it's not an apple.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but only if you have good aim.
Can't knock on the door. Very good.
He's saying if you don't bring the gifts, the Kohen comes to you.
Yeah.
But for a different reason.
That was about the Saita.
I missed it.
We're just jumping. I just wanted to jump on the Kohen while and v'hu ma'amaram, and the Ramban continues. The Gemara also says in Bracha, she'ein darkam shobran b'refuas elo shenagu. The Gemara says people really don't go to doctors. It's not the appropriate thing to go to doctors. Elo shenagu b'azay fitman. Says Rambam, what's the pshat? Because it's illogical. If God's sending you a message, you got to shape up. So then shape up and you'll get better. When we go to a doctor's mamish, it's not logical. And then he says, ilu loy hoya darkam b'refuas. He says, you know what the Gemara means in Brachas? If people wouldn't get so involved in doctors, then yechle hadam, you know when you would get sick? Only when kfiyah sheyolav einish chetay. If you sin, the Eibusher sends an illness, and v'yisrapim, when will you heal? B'ratzon Hashem. That's how it would be in a perfect world. But we corrupted it. Because we go to doctors for everything, so the Eibusher said, you know what? Avol hey nagu b'refuas v'Hashem hinicham l'mikrei hatavoyim. Because people are busy going to doctors, Hashem says, all right, I'll give you what to go to doctors for. You want to go to doctors, you'll have reason to go to doctors. So it sounds like for the Ramban, it's almost like now a person can get ill even if there's no sin. The Gemara in Shabbos brings a machlokes about this. If yesh yisurim beloy oven, would a person suffer without any sins? Ramban doesn't quote that Gemara. That's what he seems to say. Then he says, v'zui kavanas baramim. When it says v'rape mikan, that the roif has reshus to heal, you know what it means? It's fast. The Ramban says God never said the patient can go to the doctor. The doctor has reshus to heal. The patient has no business going. It doesn't say the choyle has the right to go to a doctor. Really, a choyle, the patient shouldn't go. He should turn to God and say, God, why, what's the message here? And you try and fix up your life. You go to a Navi. Really, the choyle has no business going to a reifa. Okay, but no. But if someone's sick and he goes to a doctor, because he has that custom, so Hashem tells the doctor, you know what? Have rachmanis on the guy and heal him. He shouldn't go to you, but once he does, you can heal him. That's how the Ramban learns the Gemara. And that's why you need Rishus. He's answering the kasha different than Rashi and Tosfos. You know why the pasuk had to give Rishus? Because really the patient has no business being there. So who said the doctor's allowed to heal him? So Hashem had to say, there's two different things here. The patient shouldn't be here, but you're allowed to accept him. That's why you needed Rishus. That's the Ramban's answer to the question.
It's like the earliest place where we talk about like being sick and a virus, like that kind of connection.
No, the Gemara speaks about Yisurim, Ein Yisurim Below Yoven. Illnesses only come because of Averis. It's two opinions in Gemara Shabbos. Two opinions. The patient is not doing what a frumdu is supposed to do. But the The doctor, the chiddush of the pasuk is the doctor shouldn't think I can't heal him. Loy mipnei chashim, maybe the doctor might think I might make things worse. Maybe who should I should treat him? There's always a chance he might die in my hands. So Ramban says, no, you're an expert, you're a baki b'malachahi, and also that the doctor shouldn't think Hashem levada, God is the roifer. So Hashem tells the roifer, don't worry, you don't have to make that calculation. I'm allowing you to heal shekvar nagu. You know why? Because the patient's not such a big rasha. The fact is that's what people do. Va'alkein ha'anoshim hanitzim, those that fight, the pasuk in Mishpatim, that hit each other with the even or the egroif, with a rock, with a fist. Yesh al ha'makah tashlumi refuah. The makah is to pay for refuah. Why? Ki ha'torah lo tismech dineh al anisim. The Torah does not rely on miracles. Kasher Amar, like it says in Re'eh, there'll always be poor people amongst the earth. It's hard to know what he's saying over here. Some want to tie in what the Ramban here is saying at the end, that everything I said until now is only for an illness which is kind of on the inside. But if somebody has a gash, or if somebody's poshut has a blunt injury, he was damaged by a tool or by someone, his poshut dripping blood, then you can't rely on a miracle. How's the Navi? That type of gash, that type of wound, if it's an open wound in the body,
Need stitches.
right. But if it's mamish something on the inside, that's how someone will learn the Ramban. Although the Ramban doesn't say it clearly, the Ramban at the end does seem to, I would say the Ramban is saying, no, really all illnesses are the same. Since the minig is for people to go to the doctor, so therefore if Reuven bashes Shimon, he can't tell Shimon, I'm not paying doctor bills, you should trust in God. Reuven has no right to say that because the minig is to go to doctors.
Reuven is the one that caused the damage, so he can't.
So why can't Reuven tell Shimon, I'm not paying for your doctor bills, go trust in God? Because since the minig is to go to doctors, so Reuven has no right to deny Shimon.
He can say that, but
Right.
Reuven hit him.
Exactly, right. But the Ramban finishes off again, Avol b'rtzois Hashem darkei ish, if the Eibishter really desires your actions, ein lo eisik b'reifim, there's no business to go to a doctor. That's the end of the Ramban's piece. Right, pretty fascinating. So again, according to the Ramban, why does the Pasuk have to say a doctor is allowed to heal? Because the patient really has no business going to the doctor. So really the doctor should say, how can I heal you? You're not even allowed to come here. The chiddush is, since the minig is people go to doctors, like the Ramban quotes from Masechta Brachas, really you shouldn't go, but that's the minig. So b'meila, the Eibusha tells the doctor, no, you can help him, fine. That's what the Ramban says. So the Eibusha gave the doctor reshus to heal. The patient really has no business going there. Fascinating. Ramban's pretty extreme. Let's see a couple other shittas, not next page. Number 6 and number 7 are both the Ibn Ezra. Number 6 is an Ibn Ezra in our parsha. Number 7 is an Ibn Ezra in Tehillim. And the Ibn Ezra is bothered with the same contradiction that the Ramban is bothered with. The Ramban's really bothered with a contradiction, which is on the one hand, the Eibishter gives the doctor the right to heal. On the other hand, we said the king also was, the pasuk rebukes him, that not only didn't daven to God, he went to the doctors. So is going to a doctor negative or not? So what was Ramban's answer? The patient shouldn't go, but the doctor's allowed to heal. The Ibn Ezra says, I have a different answer. Look at number 6. Doctors have permission, l'rape, to heal. Only hamakas v'aptsoim sheyiro b'chutz, only wounds on the exterior of the body, like the pasuk in Mishpatim. Rakol cholishu bifnim, but any internal illness, beguf biyad Hashem l'rafasai, only the Eibishter can heal. V'chein kosav, and so it says kihu yachiv v'yachiv v'yachabesh, the Eibishter causes the pain and he will give the bandage. That's talking when it's an inner ailment, an inner illness. In Mishpatim, the doctor has reshus to heal. That's when two people got into a fist fight, and there's blood, there's gashes. And there even has a quote, "V'kasav ba'asa." It says about Asa, he had an internal illness. Gam b'chol yuloi darash es Hashem. He didn't search for God, he searched for the doctors.
So it says ki'im berevim, only in the doctors.
Right, but the Ramban already said that but if going to the doctor was fine,
fine,
was
but
just that
he only doctor. Then it's no.
Right. I hear you. The way that Ramban worded it was, if the doctor thing was fine, as only didn't daven to the Eibishter, so the pasuk should just say that Asa forgot about God. The fact that it mentions the doctors means that's a point of note as well. So the Ibn Ezra is dealing with the same kash as the Ramban. On the one hand, Asa is rebuked for turning to the doctors. On the other hand, this week's parsha, a roif has the power to heal. So the Ramban's answer is, the doctor can heal, but the patient really has no business going. The Ibn Ezra's answer depends what type of wound. An exterior wound, the doctor has the right. An internal wound, it came directly from God. And like I mentioned, there are some who want to say the Ramban really holds the same way. Because the Ramban most of the time was speaking, when could you say an illness comes directly from God? It makes sense by an inner illness. But if somebody hit you and you have blood oozing out, Lav Dafka, the Ramban would say, go to the Navi and ask him what Aveira you did, Even though, if you didn't do an Aveira, why would the Eibush have allowed Shimon to hit you? Still, but what the Navi's not going to stitch you up, you can't rely on a miracle. So some say that the Ramban really is the same as this Ibn Ezra. Look at number 7. The Ibn Ezra says something else in Tehillim. It's in Kapitel Lamed Beis. The pasuk says, "V'haboteich b'Hashem." If one trusts in God, Chesed Yisov Venu, kindness will encircle him. Says the Ibn Ezra, "Shelo yishan ala roifim." Do not rely on doctors like Asa did. The Dan you should know, says Ibn Ezra, Ki hakos of lo hitu lisrapus. The Eibush allows refuah in this week's parsha. Rak mimakas ben adam. Only if you were hit by a man. Ki Hashem, but Ki Hashem levade hu roife Yisrael. But if the illness did not come because somebody striked you, then the Eibush is your doctor. Urufuwasa lechazek nafshay ulahoisif al yerosay. And the Eibush will heal you to strengthen your soul and to add your fear of him. So here the Ibn Ezra is saying something similar but different. In number 6, in this week's parsha, he says, when do you go to a doctor? For an external wound. When do you turn to Hashem? An internal wound. In number 7, he says, similar but slightly different. If your wound came from a person that hit you, even if it's not external, if somebody broke your leg, it's not an external wound. Maybe it is, maybe a leg breaking. It's kind of the same thing, maybe. All right, fine, but it's definitely different words. Here he says that
stomach and hurt your spleen.
Right.
But it's still.
It's similar enough, but it's slightly different. Here he's saying that the barometer was the wound inflicted by another person, or did it come stamas, or you woke up and you had it? Fine. In number 6 is a little bit different. It was, is it on the inside or the outside? Fine. Akoponim, so the Ibn Ezra, though, is reaching this conclusion because he has the same steers the Ramban's dealing with. The Ibn Ezra says, we criticize Asa for seeking out the doctors. Dov the Melch says in Tilim, trust God when it comes to illnesses. But the Raif has Rishus Larapos. So must be the doctors talking about the story in Mishpatim. 2 people hit each other. It's an external wound. It came from somebody else, etc.
Everything comes from that story of Asa.
Right. That's the big story. That's the big story. And if you all right, fine. So you have the Ibn Ezra. You have. Let's go to number 9 for a second. Rabbeinu Bechaya. Rabbeinu Bechaya says in this week's parish, "V'rapa yerape, kol refuah b'basar v'dam, loy mitzanu b'chol ha'ksuvim kiim b'dagish." Whenever a human is healing, it's described in the psukim with a pei. As you mentioned, v'chein ripinu es bavel v'loy nirpasa. We healed Bavel, she wasn't healed. It's talking people, as scoffers are saying that people. Avo b'kodesh baruch hu matzinu b'rafa. By Hashem, it's always a fei. A pei is considered harsh, kosher. A fei is considered soft. V'husha kasuv, like you see, Rufa'enu Hashem ve'ei rafei. Heal me, I'll be healed. Uksiv horoife. By the way, the pasuk is strange. Eibush to heal me, and I'll be healed. What is that supposed to mean? We say in davening, heal me, God, and we'll be healed. Well, obviously, if God heals us, we'll be healed. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the answer might. Uksiv haroifel l'shvurei leiv. The Eibush heals broken hearts. Erpo mushavasam. I will hear their waywardness. Vayirpo l'kim savim melech. Ani Hashem
Yirpa with the dot in there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Two of them have dots.
Yes, you're right. Yep, it is.
So, you know?
Well, the Vart is, it's probably saying by the Abishter you find both, but by a person it's always with a pay. He seems by the Abishter you find Motzinu Berofa. By the Abishter you find both, but by a regular doctor it's just a pay. Why is that? Vatam Boze, you know why? If you get healed by a doctor of flesh and blood, it's not easy. There's tests and there's lots of pains. Very difficult. The medicine can have side effects. The antibiotics, it kills everything that it comes, right? It's bitter medicine.
Tastes terrible.
Chemotherapy.
But when the Eibishter heals, benachas, it's soft. The Ein Sham Tzarkal is no pain at all. That's why the Eibishter's refuah is sometimes said refa. Fei is considered a soft letter in contrast to pei. Ki birchas Hashem hitashe, the Eibishter benches and makes you wealthy. It's all good. V'lo yosef etzev ima, the Eibishter's brachas only bring abundance and right, nice. No etzev. No. Oh, and then he says, right. Umasha omru razal v'rapa yirape mikansha nitnu reshus l'roife loy omru ela b'makashe b'chutz. He gives the same answers to Ibn Ezra. It's only for an outer wound. Shakos and medaba, but what was talking about? Avochayli mibefnim, if it's an inner illness, ein zet tolu biyad haroife, it doesn't depend on the doctor. Ela biyad haroife kol boser, the Eibishter shebiyad nefesh kol chay. So Rabbeinu Bechaya is going together with the Ibn Ezra that you don't go to a doctor for inner illnesses, that you turn to God. The Ramban seemed to say you should never go. What?
Rambam, he was a doctor.
The Rambam, but we'll see in the Rebbe's letter number 10. The Ramban was also a doctor. Right. So that's why. So the Rambam was also a doctor. So like I mentioned, there are some that believe that the Ramban in number 5 agrees to the Ibn Ezra and Rabbeinu Bechaya. He was only talking about inner illnesses. But outer illnesses, the Navi can't really, send the magical stitches.
He ended up himself like he's a doctor because that's what everyone is saying.
Right. But it could also be that he even endorses, if it's a physical wound, to go to a doctor. But like in any case, Ramban said that ultimately the doctor is allowed to do it. The fact is that's the minig.
Is the Ibn Ezra a doctor?
He probably studied medicine, but we don't know that he practiced it. Maybe at some point. He tried, he got his hands in lots of things, right? If I would make shrouds, no one would die. If I would make candles, the sun would never set, he said. Yeah, that was him. Like, and he was a writer. He wrote, from Parnassa, he wrote.
They say if the government got it, became, started owning the deserts, there'd be a deficit of sand.
So he wrote, for Parnassa, he wrote.
Which black guy?
Thomas Sowell.
Oh, that's his name? It's good.
So there happens to be some time that the Ramban is only speaking in a perfect world, If all the Yidden are doing the will of Hashem in a perfect world, that's the way it should be. But ultimately, that's not the reality that we live in. So there's some that time that the Ramban, like the Ramban finishes off at the end, but the Ramban says at the end, you shouldn't rely on a miracle. What does that mean? He's saying that everything I said until now is just, living in utopia. But in the practical world, you have to go to doctors. Or he only said that about the case when Reuven smashes Shimon. Reuven has no right to say, well, I'm not paying doctor bills, daven mincha and you'll get all better. Yeah. He has no right to rely on this miracle. Right. But the patient should. That's what the Ramban does seem to be saying. But the Tzitz Eliezer was a big Rav in Eretz Yisrael a couple decades ago. He writes clearly that he believes the Ramban is just saying, if you live in a perfect world, but there's a Beis HaMikdash and all the Yidden are doing the will of God. But, in the world we live in, the Eibishter has put us under the rules of Teva. We're not living a miraculous life. We're under the rules of Teva. The Eibishter also orchestrates Teva, fine, but that's the game that God plays, the game of nature. And in such a case, Ramban would agree you always have to go to a doctor. That's what the Tzitz Eliezer says. To me, it doesn't seem the Ramban saying that.
Or the Ibn Ezra or the Rabbeinu Bechaya.
Well, yeah. Fine. We continue. Number 8 is a Magen Avram. The Magen Avram finds itself in Hilchas Shabbos, and is quoting from the Radvaz. The Magen Avram is in the 1600s. He's quoting from the Radvaz, who was 100 years before him. More, the Radvaz lived a long life, right? Some say 110 years. And he says like this: number 8. If a chayla does not want to take the medicine, you force him. You can force him.
Against everything.
You can force him. If the chayla says, I need this this remedy, the doctor says, nah, the guy doesn't need, we always listen to the chayla. Even on Yom Kippur, if the chayla says, I need to eat, and the doctor says, you don't, you eat. Leiv Yedei Maris Nafsha. The heart knows, a person knows what they're really going through. But what if the chayla says, I need this medicine, and a doctor says it will damage him? Shoyim in the right, we listen to the doctor and we refrain. We will not allow the chayla to take the medicine. But the first din, that is all from the Radvaz, as you see in the brackets there. So the Magen Avram's first din that he quotes is that if the chayla doesn't want the remedy, you stick it down his throat.
He is later, according to what that, right? As Ezra said. He wants God to heal him.
Oh, so you Rabbi Yaakov Emden, the great Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Now Rabbi Yaakov Emden, it's hard. Was he a halachist? Was he a philosopher? He was everything. He mastered everything. And he writes about this Magen Avram, about this psak. He says this is only true if the medicine is tried, tested, and proven. If it's not, and the doctors, it's a bit of guesswork, they're hoping, it's still in the trial period, you can never force the chayla. If the chayla says, I don't want because I'm worried, this, that, and the other, and there's really no proof that it could help, the Rabbi Yaakov Emden says you cannot force the chayla to take it. And in that discussion, Rabbi Yaakov Emden speaks about that he quotes the idea of the Ibn Ezra Rabbeinu Bechaya, external wounds versus internal wounds. External wounds where the doctors know for sure, that's why the doctor has the right to heal. But what's the pshat in the Ibn Ezra Rabbeinu Bechaya, the distinction of external, internal? Internal wounds, very often it's guesswork. Try this, someone has this, not feeling well, this, that, or the others. I can tell you, it's all guesswork.
Not today.
Okay, the Maharsham already is 100 years ago, right? That if you use, right. So in other words, so the Poskim Taina, X-rays. Some Poskim Taina X-rays is already considered like external. The idea of the Ibn Ezra wasn't so much external, internal. It's does the doctor can the doctor see it clearly, or it's an assumption and presumption? So an X-ray is broken bones, right? Exactly. Right, exactly.
Intangible.
It's
getting wrong for 20 years.
Elimination, especially, when it comes to the head.
They get it wrong, but a lot of times treatments work.
What?
Healing in the dark.
They get it wrong, but their treatments end up working, even if it's not like.
Sometimes they
You
don't.
get them out.
They had treatments that
whether
worked
they
back
do,
then.
a lot of times works.
No, but
can't say
a lot of times
radiation
doesn't
prevent.
work.
A lot of times doesn't work. And even when it does, it's often not the first
guesswork.
time.
But they had real refuahs back then that healed people from internal medicine. Internal
There was a big
issues.
Kabbalist 250 years ago,
They
one
had
of the
their
greatest students of the Ramchal. His name was Reb Moshe David Vali, the Ramad Vali, wrote lots on Kabbalah. And he says that today's doctors aren't like they used to be. He says there aren't any real doctors. He says 250 years ago. He says the real doctors are all those days of someone who really understands medicine, someone who could look at somebody and see their illness and know right away what herb they need. He says those things don't really exist anymore. Fine, medicine obviously has come a lot of ways in other areas, that's for sure. What?
Bad leeches, so.
Yeah.
Leeches and eels.
But why is it
Same
kaifen
idea.
this way? Because
That's what eels in the head for
Why?
electricity.
Because
They didn't know
Because
electricity. Someone had
So back to Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Rabbi Yaakov Emden says about this Magen Avram, he says, don't you know the Ibn Ezra, don't you know all those that distinguish between exterior wounds and internal wounds? What's the reason? an exterior wound, the doctor can be certain of how to heal it. The internal stuff, what goes on inside, it's all guesswork. And therefore, says Rabbi Yankov Emden, in internal stuff, you go to God. It's only what the doctor knows for sure that you have to follow the doctor. And that's why he says, when the Magen Avraham says, if the Chayla says, I don't want the medicine, you shove it down his throat, it's only if it's tried, tested, and proven. Not if it's guesswork. And he gets that distinction from this Ibn Ezra Rabbeinu Bechaya. So Yankov Emden is somewhat in their line of thought as well. The Vilna Gaon also believes that opinion, the difference of external versus internal. The Vilna Gaon had a brother who was ill, and they wanted to take him to a doctor, and the Vilna Gaon didn't let them take him to a doctor. I don't know if in the end he went, or what happened to him in the end, that we don't know. Right. But the Vilna Gaon said, the Vilna Gaon said this distinction. He said, internal wounds, you go to God. And he also said the same word as Ramban. For the doctor has permission to heal, right, even for internal wounds. The chayla shouldn't go. He didn't want his brother to go. So the doctors asked him, so why did God make doctors, B'chal? So he could have answered for external wounds. You know what he said? Why did God create shkotzim, chazirim? It's for the goyim. It's for the goyim. It's for the goyim. No, he said, if a Jew becomes a doctor, it's for the goyim. It's for the goyim. It's for the goyim.
The tort lawyers.
To help you make up on us.
That's it.
They got to be a witness.
It's for the goyim.
Got to bill you.
So it's fascinating. So you have, and there's another big fellow on this side. There's another big fellow. Rabbi Yankov Emden had a number of people that he unfortunately didn't see eye to eye with. The Ramchal and the numerous people. The most amongst them was Yonis and Eibeshitz.
Not mentioning that.
What?
Sounds like you're avoiding that.
Well, that's the guy we're getting. Most amongst them, Yonis and Eibeshitz. And the reason why he couldn't handle Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz is he accused Yonis and Eibeshitz of being a follower of Shabsai Tzvi. Yonis and Eibeshitz wrote many amulets, and in them were, in Rabbi Yankov Emden's eyes, clear references. There was Shin Tzaddiks written there, all types of stuff about Shabsai Tzvi, Rosh Hashanah, Gematrias, this and that. He accused him of being a Shabsai Tzvinik, to the point that Yankov Emden's students put Yonis and Eibeshitz's students in Cherem, and so to vice versa. If you were a Frum Jew living in Germany, then you were in Cherem. It doesn't matter whichever side you're on, you're in Cherem.
That's wild.
And it mamash, it got horrible. They're actually buried next to each other, funnily enough. They're kind of close enough. And Yankov Emden Pasha made a war against anyone that smelled of any Sabbateanism.
Do we have any of those amulets today that we can view them ourselves?
We have some of them recorded. The Noid Yehuda was asked to get involved in this, and he has letters, and he said, listen, by looking at those amulets, it's
tell. Black
and white, Shabsai. He said, but because I know of Yonis and Eibeshitz, so we're going to have to try and explain.
But do you have what it said?
What? He makes reference to some of the things. The Pnei Yeshua was also involved in the argument, and he supported Yaakov Emden. You know, the Yonis and Eibeshitz was really in hot water. Funnily enough, in this area, they actually both agree. Because Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz wrote a sefer on the Shulchan Aruch Yoreh Deah called Kreisi Uplesi, which is another term for the Urim V'Tumim that was in the Choshen. And in Hilchas Nida, he writes in the brackets, he says, I don't get it. On the one hand, we say the Eibusha gave a doctor permission to heal. On the other hand, we say the best doctors go to Gehenna in the end of Kiddushin. How do you fit those together? And he says, it depends. Is it an exterior wound or an internal wound? And he says like this. He says an exterior wound is like arithmetic. It's like mathematics. It's just clear. Or it's like engineering, whatever that. He said it's mamish. It's so obvious to the doctor of how to. It's not what happened here. It's who cares. It's, let's just put it back together. Right. Let's fix Humpty Dumpty. Let's just fix it together. He says such a thing, the doctor has reshus to do. That's the story in Pashas Mishpatim. Reuven and Shimon had a fist fight, and that's what happened. But internal wound, which is guesswork. And Yonis and Eibeshitz says, I don't want to tell you how many people, the doctors caused their demise by guessing and trying this and that, and the guy could have lived longer possibly had he not gone to the doctors.
those
That's
days,
what he
they were
says,
drilling
exactly.
holes in people's
Yeah,
heads.
especially in those days, right?
Yeah.
So Yonis and Eibeshitz says the same thing. So you have Yonis and Eibeshitz, you have Yaakov Emden, you have Rabbeinu Bechaya, you have the Ibn Ezra, who are all distinguishing between, and the Vilna Gaon, between external wounds and internal wounds. And the Ramban perhaps holds like them, or maybe more extreme. They should never go to a doctor. So you have lots of opinions on that side. But then you have one of the first people to come out very strong was the Mate Moshe, Reb Moshe Moss. He lives 500 years ago. One of the greatest students of the Maharshal in Lublin in Poland. The Mate Moshe is a very important work. And the Mate Moshe says, I'm aware of the Ramban, I'm aware of all these Rishonim that hesitate going to doctors. Says the Mate Moshe, we don't paskin like any of them. Not like the Ramban who's extreme and says never go, and not like those who differentiate between external wound and internal wound. He says you always go. And he says we have stories in Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the Gemara says, had an internal wound and he went to a doctor to get healed. He says what? According to these opinions, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was violating the will of God. He was one of the greatest tzaddikim that ever lived. He says more than that. In Masechta Gittin, there's 2 blots straight where the Gemara speaks about the most bizarre remedies for internal issues, internal diseases. Frek the Mate Moshe, what that all those 2 blätter of Gemara were written for, like the Ramban says, are people, someone who's separated from the congregation of God, like the Ramban coins him? Can't be. Doesn't make sense. And therefore the Mate Moshe says, bottom line is, you always go to a doctor. It doesn't matter where the wound came from another person or from a lightning bolt. It doesn't matter external, internal. You always and he says you have to go to a doctor. So that's already 500 years ago, and he was a halachist, not a philosopher. He was a halachist. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz was a halachist, but Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz was a big makubal, amulets. He had his head in everything. Now the fact that he mastered nigla was just another. He mastered everything. Of course, he learned the whole time, but he was a big philosopher as well, and he had his head in all in yonim. The Mate Moshe was a halachist, strict halacha, and he says in the world of halacha, there's no room for these philosophical distinctions that if the doctor knows what he's doing, you go to him, but if it's guesswork, you turn to God. No, you always go to the doctor. That's it. After him came the Chidah. The Chidah is in the times of Yaakov Emden, almost the same time, he's a couple decades younger than Yaakov Emden, and the Chidah, in his Birkei Yosef, which is his commentary on Shulchan Aruch, he writes that he's well aware of the Ramban and all this, but he says the Chidah says that in the life that we live now, you can't rely on miracles. He says the minute everyone goes to doctors, that's how you have to conduct yourself. And the Chidah says that great people go to doctors. And if you have a guy who says, no, ich gehe nicht zum Doktor, I don't go to doctors, I rely straight on God, says the Chidah, it's forbidden. The Gaiva. You think you're better than everybody else? The Gaiva. Get off your high horse. He said it's kimat osur. So he flips it around. The Ramban wants to say it's osur to go to the doctor. The Chidah says today it's osur not to go to the doctor because you just smell of Gaiva. It just feels people bigger than you and greater than you have gone to doctors. You're not going to go. You're not going to go. So the Chidah flips it around. So you have the Mate Moshe and the Chidah vehement. Around the same time was the Tshuva Me'ava, Elazar Fleckels, who was not a Kabbalist by any means. In fact, we spoke about, he writes that, Bechal, Yaakov Emden was a Kabbalist, but he writes that he thinks the Zohar is not really from Rashbi, or maybe only very little. The Tshuva Me'ava went with that path. The Tshuva Me'ava says, I love Rashbi, but I don't think the Zohar has anything to do with him, and therefore, don't bring Zohar into halacha. Fakert, Shabsai Tzvi took the Zohar and got many of his Mishugasan from there. A very misnagdish tshuva from the Tshuva Me'aver, Elazar Fleckels. But Elazar Fleckels, we brought a tshuva of his when it came to the discussion of honoring your father, honoring your Zayda. Anyhow, he tainas the same thing. He says that I know what the philosophers say, but that's not halacha. In the world of halacha, the Eibishter gave you responsibility to watch after your body. You don't have the right to say, the Eibishter made you sick. Maybe it came from an Aveira Taka. So you got to do two things. You got to do tshuva to God, but you also got to go to a doctor. You got to do both. You got to do both. Maybe had you not sinned in the first place, you wouldn't have to go to a doctor. But now that you did, you don't just have the right to do tshuva, you also got to go to the doctor, no matter what. So you have the Mate Moshe, the Chidah, the Tshuva Me'ava, who all say that in the view of halacha, one is obligated to go to a doctor. So you have the philosophers on one side who want to distinguish different illnesses, this and that, maybe better to turn to God. And then you have the halachists on the other side who say black and white, one has no right to avoid the doctor no matter what the illness. Interesting. With this we come to number 10, a letter of the Rebbe. The Yadua, says the Rebbe, it's known, this is from way back when, from Tovshin Yud Aleph, at the end of the year. So the Rebbe's already Rebbe. The Yadua Asher Kamai Merazal Chizkiyo, the king, hid a book of Refuas. This is a story the Gemara refers to very briefly. Chizkiah hid a book of Refuas, and the Chacham were very happy. What's it talking about? Major debate. The Rambam and the Meiri, as the Rebbe is going to quote the Rambam, holds this was a book of magic. It was based on astronomy. It was written by someone who was involved in astronomy. It has magic in it, and the Rambam says people used to learn it just for the Chachma Sheba, but you can't practice it. That's how the Rambam and the Meiri learn. And the Rambam is well known, didn't believe in astrology, and it's all foolishness. That's what the Rambam believed. The Tashbates, one of the last of the Rishonim, says that this book was actually written by one of Noach's kids, who a malach came to him on the Teva and taught him all the secrets of Refuah, and one of Noach's kids wrote the Sefer. Now it happens to be that there's another Sefer, an old Yiddish book called the Book of Secrets, Sefer Horozim, which we know the Yidden had during the second Beis HaMikdash, and there's also a tradition that Noach wrote that book, the Sefer Horozim, based on what a malach taught him on the Teva. But the Tashbeit is saying something, not to be confused, it's similar, that a malach came and taught one of Noach's kids.
Also have something to do with Shlomo?
Okay, in just a moment. So the Tashbeit says this book of Refuos was written by one of Noach's kids, who was taught it by a malach on the Teva. The Rashba and the Radak say that this book was actually written by Shlomo, and it was all about Refuah, Mamash Refuos. Rashi also learns that it's all a book of physical Refuos. You know why Chizkiah hid the book? Because people were forgetting about God. If you had any illness, you opened the book to this page and you found what you had to do. So he hid the book. He hid the book in order people should not know what to do and should turn to God, and the Chum were happy. So doesn't that teach you, like the Ramban, not to have both? Get rid of the Refuos, just have God. So the Rebbe says, first of all, the Rambam learns, the Kfar Nizar HaRambam, the Rambam learns differently. Shelo yefarshu es hamaymer neged chachmas harefuah. The Rambam learns it's talking about Pirish Zeh Sefer Sgulas. It was a sefer of astrological Sgulas and magical stuff. It's not talking about medicine. The Rambam writes in Pirish HaMishnayos Psachim and Emor Nevuchim. And the Rambam says, but medicine? V'nasna Torah Reshus, the Torah gave permission. V'alpi Chassidus, the Rebbe says, Pirish Gamken Koyach, that the Eibusha gave the power, l'roifa, to the doctor, the Raphos, to heal. Now the Rebbe says, the Ibn Ezra, the Ibn Ezra holds what we saw, Shazeu rak b'choli shebechutz, only an outer wound, v'loi b'fnim, not the inner wound. And Re'ei Gamken, the Ramban, in the Psich al Torah, the Ramban b'chukoisai, the Taz brings the Ramban in Yoreh De'ah. So the Rebbe says, there's a Ibn Ezra, there's a Ramban. Hare kvar halacha ravachas b'Yisrael. The halach is already widespread, like the Rambam, lishtamish b'refuas, to use refuas, and to trust that the Eibishter will send his blessing through that doctor and through that medicine, v'yirpeim and heal you. In other words, there's a happy medium. You go to the doctor, but you believe in God.
Is somebody specifically asking if you should go to a doctor?
The letter...
Or was
Wasn't a Michtav Klali.
No, it's a private letter. It's an Igris. It's I don't know offhand what the. This is not in
They don't write
the earlier part of the letter, just not related to this point. This is
Let us
just,
not wait. The Evan Ezra would say that if it's an external wound, you're
You
not
go-
allowed.
no, no.
You're not allowed to also daven to Hashem. Go to a
no,
doctor. You're not
no,
allowed
no,
to
no,
tell
no,
him?
of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you can. Of course you can.
Okay.
But what? No, of course you can. I will tell you though that there's a difference. We said the Mate Moshe and the Chidah are on the same side. They're on the Poskim side. You have to go to the doctors. But the Mate Moshe writes it Mamash in a Masnagdish way. The Mate Moshe, I mean, he's in the 1500s, but he writes, you better go to a doctor. Don't place your trust in God. And that could Mamash be misconstrued. What he means to say is, don't stand there saying, God help me, and that's it. But he writes the words, don't just put your don't say I'm putting my trust in God.
It's kind of like at the edge of the Yam Suf. Don't just stand there and daven. Don't just stand there and
Right.
walk forward.
Right. When the Chidah though says the same psak, but the Chidah says you have to go to a doctor, but the Chidah says don't believe in the doctor. The Chidah says go to the doctor, but don't believe in it. It's just, the doctor's like the cover-up of how the Abish is going to help
Like
you.
the Rebbe said that in Chassidus, it gives the koyach.
Right, exactly. So it's just funny, the Chidah, who was a Makubal and everything, more of a
No idea
Pnimistic, he words it, they're saying the same thing, but the Chidah,
and it'll give you
exactly, yeah. And the Shapiro always quotes that the Rebbe once told someone, "Du meinst das heilt?" You think he's the guy healing you? It's just
And he needs someone.
exactly. It's just a cover-up. It's just an excuse. Excuse. Sakaponim. That is
Du bist a lawyer.
right. Right. You did. So Rabbi Heller in Crown, Rabbi Heller
The guy doesn't get
says that
cremated.
the Iker is the Yedid. Rabbi Heller says the Iker is the Yedid. When the Rebbe would say, "Go to a Roifa Yedid," Rabbi Heller, I heard from him, he says the Iker is the Yedid, close friend. The Roif is just a cover-up, right? It's just a cover-up. But that's how the Chidah puts it.
How you started this whole thing, Yeshayahu.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? That we don't name?
Oh, I'll get you a source. I'll find you a source. I don't remember offhand.
And the reason is because he
Died at the hands of his Einikel. Right.
Didn't he turn the whole thing with Levi Gerela?
Yeah, but then his Einikel cut him.
Dr. Levin calls it.
It's a known
calls
thing.
it
Tzitzis was
praxis
sticking out.
of
Rabbi Zalman named his
What?
kid Yeshayahu.
Fully?
Who?
That's what I remember now.
Who would name
Rabbi
it?
Zalman.
Your
Calls
brother?
his office refuted.
Named
Yeshayahu?
after his wife's grandfather.
There you go.
Wife's
His wife's grandfather.
Just to end with one thing.
He moved out of the Gesh.
When the Frierdiker Rebbe was a kid, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, became very
Don't tell
ill.
him anything. You can
I
tell him.
already told him before. I asked him, "What's your kid's name?"
Oh gosh.
So he says, Yeshayahu. I said, because I just heard that we don't name. He said, "Why?" I said,
What's the source?
And then he asked me the source.
You're on the hot plate now.
Oh,
This just comes
Oh,
to my
so-
point. Don't name after grandparents and this is my
This is
my
why you
30
check.
year.
This is the lawyer guy. He checks. For his other lawyer friends, is there anything
Yeah,
wrong with
yeah,
this name?
Yeah. This is a Kayan. He's a
He
Kayan.
needs to know.
He actually looked up. He said the Taisus read is Yeshaya, not Yeshayahu. That's what he
That, like he said.
yeah, we'll get the source. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was young,
Places to look.
I set it all up.
You guys know that we have now 110,000 svarim to choose from.
Soon the shiurim are going to be 10 pages
Shiurim will be
plus.
3-4 hours.
Exactly. We
We're
expect
starting.
doubling.
6:30. We're starting. 6:30. We're starting. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was young, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, was ill, gravely ill, and the doctors told him, "You're not going to make it." And the Rebbe Rashab said, "The Eibishter gives reshus for a doctor to heal. Hashem never gave reshus for the doctor to give
Yeah,
a
the
death
Rebbe, didn't the
prognosis."
Rebbe say that?
So they would quote this often.
Yeah.
Wow.
I saw that actually the Vilna Gaon said it as well. Just
About you're not allowed to give a prognosis. You're supposed to.
Well, a negative
doctor
one
has
especially.
right. The doctor has no right.
Doctor's crazy.
Yeah, with your mom.
Because they would come in and start saying,
Yeah.
how she's
That's
not
not your
gonna do it.
job.
It's a famous
father-
thing
You're healers. What are you
I
doing?
didn't ask
Right.
you. I didn't ask you for.
for a history or a
Death
prognosis.
You have no right to say that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's from the Friedrich
I always
Rebbe's
felt-
source.
I always
The
felt
Rebbe Rashab said, the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rashab was the fun. The Rebbe Rashab wrote a will. At that point, the Rebbe Rashab was so unwell, he wrote a will for the Friedrich Rebbe called Chanoich Lenar.
Yeah.
And the doctors told him, the Rebbe Rashab really was unsure what the future is going to be. He was that unwell. But he told the doctor, don't tell me those things. You have no right to tell me that.
How much taka longer did he live after that?
A couple decades. I don't know, 30 years
There
maybe.
we go. That's
Yeah.
the prognosis.
Yeah. Anyhow, all right, this is the...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
wow.
Okay.
Shkoyach,
Oh, yeah?
James, Shkoyach,
Beautiful.
everybody who.
I don't know how I remember.
You do.
Make sure you feel it.